Today we're talking about Platonic intimacy with my dear friend, Dr. Brooke Keels, where she defines what it is, why it matters, and how we can practically move into growing this necessity of relationship.
Welcome to the Sifted Wheat Podcast with Leslie Lamb, a counselor by profession, a minister of truth, and a lover of people. This is a safe place where she sets a path for others to learn how to move through hard seasons with confidence and grace, encouraging your faith, empowering your choices, and challenging your perceptions through the Word, the wisdom from years of counseling others, and her own experience of being sifted. Here's Leslie.
I am so excited that we're in the room with Dr. Brooke Keels. I've been setting this up and I've been, telling the listeners that I was going to have you on and that we were going to be talking about Platonic intimacy, which I'm sure has them with a big question mark. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
So one, thank you so much for being here. And can you just tell my friends who you are so that they can have a better idea of where you're coming from?
Sure. I don't. Oh, okay. It's funny. I don't mind talking about myself in some ways, but I actually really dislike it in this way. But who I am to you is that it's kind of a fascinating story, frankly, is that because you were my mentor from the time I was 16 on, and I literally wouldn't be here without you. I might be in the world, but it would be
a very different world.
A very different world. The joke is probably jail. And so, you have walked alongside me and for so long, degree wise, I have a master's in counseling and PhD in family therapy, and have just been in the mental health field for 16 years and worked in faith-based and non-faith-based. And now I am in Dallas, Texas, and I am the chief clinical officer for Lighthouse Recovery, Texas, which is a men's extended care program. And so we have the clinical aspect, and then they also live in our, we have 4 houses and super small population, men 17 to 40. They're not all in the same house, just for anybody wondering. That would be probably a disaster, but
I would think.
But what I love about the work that I get to do now, other than working with and for all men, which is kind of, me, it's really where
perfect for
it's
you.
It's really a good fit.
Yeah.
That way. And it's really incredible to do that work, because when people step out of inpatient treatment, then they're typically with us an average of 7 months. And so we get to help simulate life and, from a completely not shameful place, it is, they're allowed to struggle with us.
That's great.
Right. And just have the support, because getting over substance abuse and sex addiction and gambling addiction and all of those things just requires life to happen, and to be able to do that with us. So we're not trying to protect them, keep them in a bubble,
right?
But let's build our life and reconcile families. And so it's just an honor. And I honestly just work with some of the best people I've ever met. And I'm just, so I get to be in Dallas, and which is just such a large city. And it's so weird, living somewhere where there's never anything to do. And there it's there's so much.
What are we going to do this weekend?
I know, yeah. But do we have money? Probably not anymore. Because we, went to a ball game or whatever. But so, but it's also nice to be close. We've got the only child with the only child. So the grandparents are here.
Yes. Yeah.
And
not too far away,
not
but
too far.
Far enough away.
Far enough away.
I understand that. And I love that you're reminding our listeners that you are working with men, because I do know that I do have some male listeners. And so I want them to listen in, because we've had some really hard conversations over the last few weeks. And I want people to understand that intimacy has been so misunderstood in our culture, and so sexualized. And when you were talking about Platonic intimacy, I was like, we have to have that conversation, because I think more people need to understand that it doesn't have to move in this sexual angle that culture's always trying to push for whatever reason, to our detriment, actually. So would you kind of give us a explanation or a definition for what you call Platonic intimacy?
Yeah, I mean, and I will tell you, like, it's become so important and has now been so neglected that, like, we wrote it into our clinical curriculum, like how to be a friend and have a friend. And, I think too, and I'll speak on this from, maybe a church standpoint, Big C church, right? I think we've finally started talking about, like, safe people and, my heroes, Cloud and Townsend, like, just read everything they've ever written, all, together, separately, just do it. And, so these conversations were happening, but I feel like, I don't think they missed anything by any means, but I think the culture has shifted so much and so quickly that it's like identifying a safe person is fine, and that's great. Like, we need to know how to do that, especially now more than ever. But do we actually know how to be in relationship when we identify safe people, and, like, and what that means? And, platonic intimacy is that of, intimacy and sexuality are not the same thing.
Right.
They are not the same thing. I think we have to separate that in our brains for all of our relationships, not just our platonic relationships, but for our marriages and, dating and all of those things. If we don't separate the difference between intimacy and sexuality, then I think we just miss the richness of relationships. And I think that that's what we're seeing happen, is that word, those two words just somehow get intermingled, and it really messes up kind of everything.
Right.
And so, platonic intimacy is that of deep relationship with someone that you, frankly, don't want to make out with. You know what I mean? And so what happens when we confuse intimacy and sexuality is that either you go, oh, that's a friend, and then, wait, do I want to make out with them? Because I don't, you know what I mean?
Right.
And there's that. Or what I think we're seeing happen with men is that they don't know, all they know is the sexuality part of it. And that's not a judgment statement. Like, it just kind of is what it is. And so then their relationships, because what we know about men, for example, is that they really quit building relationships after about 20 to 25. They're not making new friends.
Wow.
And so, because they don't really know what to do with it, right? I think when we're kids and it's more just open and you've got a lot of proximity and there's, and I don't want to get into the cultural aspects. I really don't even want to get to the social media aspects. I think it's more about, let's just talk about what really needs to be talked about.
Please.
So anyway, so I think really that's it. I mean, that's the, super non-scientific definition of it,
Yeah. And you said something even before we started recording that I want to dive into a little bit, because what did you say? You said that it is not the safest. Did you say it was the safest
I think it's
relationship?
The most stable. I think it's the most stable relationship we can have.
Okay. So talk to me about that, because I think that, when we think about friendships, we think that there's just so much fear of rejection.
Yes.
There's so much fear of abandonment, that guides our friendships. So explain to us how we're missing something if our platonic relationships are supposed to be the most stable.
Right. If they're not the most stable, then you're probably not doing it right.
Okay.
I mean, you're probably not that great at it.
Walk
Either
us through that.
you or who you're choosing, right? And I say this as a person who has, because like losing a close friend is devastating. It really is. And I've had people tell me, like, it feels like a breakup, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, it should feel heavy. Like, our friendships should be some of the most connected, and, like, don't get me wrong, I want you to have a healthy, super connected, intimate, separate from sexual relationship with your partner, right? Like, that absolutely should have that. But your friendships ideally are the most stable in that, you have some people who, like, they've been friends. If you think about our dream friendships, you've been friends since childhood, through all of the dates, all of the life events, you know what I mean?
Right.
And they are like the steady thing throughout. A lot of us don't have like, that has not been my experience. Like, this is something that has been incredibly challenging for me, because I'm very much a proximity person. Like, if you are in my life, because work is a big part of my life, and I have to fight to have even, like, what I would say platonic intimacy with, like, my son and my husband in that way, right? Like, you have to prioritize those things. And so I haven't had like the childhood friends that have stayed, the whole time. And I haven't had, and you know this about me, all of my friends were guys until like 9th grade.
Right.
Which was awesome. Like, it was so great because, we like played football and nobody talked about anything serious. And, it was great.
Which always boggled my mind because from a young age, I had trauma with young men. And so the safety that you had in that space was always like, I don't understand it, but I support it.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because at the time, like, I don't know, what's the big deal? But no, I mean, and God, they were just the best guys. And I'm so grateful for that because I don't know that I could have handled, like, I kind of saw what was happening with the girls and I was like, I can't be a part of that. And so I'm just, God was very good to me in those early years with these relationships. And, but here's the thing about guys is, well, then eventually they start dating other people and they get married.
Right.
And their wives are not like, really love your best friend, Brooke, or whatever.
Right.
Or they move off and move on. And so I think all of us have very much like a fondness for each other. And we're super grateful for, like, we call it like our little sandlot, that we had, our little crew. And, I'm grateful for all of that. But I have seen in my own life, there's a gap there in the amount of effort that it takes to maintain relationship and maintain and stay invested in. And if you think about it, the people that have a longevity of friendships are typically the ones they're the ones that will reach out. They're the ones that will call. They're the ones that will put the same amount of effort into a friend as they did someone they were trying to date.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
And it is a relationship that has to be cultivated, and it is more than we just like being around each other. And so, where I feel like a lot of times, we aren't good at those things is like we meet somebody, we like them, we decide like, oh, are we like best friends? But there's not actually courting, there's not actually like a slow build to a relationship. We just kind of will hang out at certain events or like that person's a good time and, come to my house and, but there's not like getting to know you. We're not like learning who people are like, we would be doing if we were trying to decide if we wanted to date someone. Oh, hopefully. It's not always. Sometimes it's just that simple, but ideally in a healthy dating relationship, you spend time, you get to know each other. You ask the stupid, what's your favorite color? And like, all of those questions. And so I think that we want our platonic friendships to be like this incredibly and deep thing, but we don't put the effort into it. It's almost like friendships have been romanticized in a way of like that you just meet and you're like best friend. It's almost like love at first sight kind of thing. And then now it's like, no, people are complicated and they're hurt. And, I have a friend of mine that, I don't even know that we would be friends, except she was so committed to pursuing a relationship with me when I literally couldn't. And I'm so grateful for that. And there have, and now I get to hopefully reciprocate in that way, but it takes a lot of effort and energy. It is not the Hallmark movie of best friends.
Right. It's true. And I think maybe it's that expectation of that ease that is what makes us pull away from it, right? Because, we talk about what intimacy is, right? It's being known and being seen, which means that you have to open yourself up to that vulnerability. And I think that we've made that, we talk about it a lot. Culturally, you hear, you need to be open, you need to be vulnerable, but actually in practice, culturally, we don't do that well. We put out an image that we want people to see of us and who we want them to think we are, but then we hold back this very integral part of ourselves, even in our friendships. Yep. And so as you're saying that, I'm thinking about that. And where else would you say that you do see that as a problem in our culture?
I think the most overt thing where it's a problem in our culture, gosh, that's a great question. I'm seeing it's like listing out in my head. I think, the number one thing is that we begin to isolate ourselves, like outside of, whoever we're dating or married to or our family.
Right.
Or we only leave ourselves open to like the people at work, just again, like proximity, to things. I think it's a huge problem because everything has become so transactional with everything. You know what I mean? Well, this was good and I like this, but it's, it's very much like, how do you make me feel all of the time? And, when you take out a very strong driving force of sexuality, what's left is intimacy.
Right.
And intimacy is not as fun.
Mm-hmm.
You know what
harder.
I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many times did I, hang out with a boy and like overlook just how dumb they were, or vice versa? I'm sure plenty of dudes, but you're like, but I really want to make out with them, so I'm just gonna like, just gonna like feel, see this through, or whatever,
maybe it'll work out.
Maybe it'll work out. But this is very different, when you've got friends coming over and you're like trying, there's not kind of that added, oxytocin, dopamine thing happening, because it is a deeper thing. It is a harder thing. And, even when the Bible talks about, what is it like, and this isn't the exact quote, it's like a sacrifice of relationship and sacrifice of community. And like when it's that scripture that's sacrifice of worship and all you know what I'm talking about?
I do. I'll find it. I'll put it in the show notes.
Thank you. Please do. And I do know the Bible. I just can't like remember it, but it's like there is sacrifice of community and relationship. It is a sacrifice for a reason, because it's an investment. But if you imagine having someone that is like committed to your life, and you're committed to their life, how amazing would that be? Because people leave, husbands leave, or you leave, or children, like all these things happen. But if you think about like the longevity of life, walking alongside someone, and hopefully that is with your spouse, but also with other people that can know you, and especially, as a woman, having women that can walk alongside you in life events, and as a man, having other men that can walk alongside you in life events, those can be, again, some of the most healthy and stable relationships we have. But I think the biggest downfall is that we don't value them the way we should. I think we all feel it in our hearts, but we don't really talk about it. And then I think people often feel very alone. Yeah. Because if my life is only good if Scott is good, and I have no other relationships outside of that, that's not great.
No.
And
that puts a lot of pressure on your marriage.
Yes.
And then also, I can just see how that would promote someone to think, well, if I don't feel that with my husband, then there must be another sexual partner out there that I can feel that with.
Yes.
And again, you've confused intimacy and sexuality.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I haven't even gone there with it. And I think probably because I just think about dudes all the time, with like work wise. And so it's a great point, right? Most affairs do not happen because you're like, what a smoke show. Let's go.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in fact, most couples I've worked with that have been in affairs, like you see the other person and you're like, I don't really get how this happened.
It's so true.
But it's because they had an intimate connection. We called it a quote unquote emotional affair, but
Yeah. And I think that that's really important too, when we think about just the power of longevity in relationship, as far as, Brian and I will be celebrating 25 years.
It's awesome.
But it has not, and very well, it has not been without grit and grime and tension and pulling away and pulling back together again, and it's just, I'm afraid for the next generation that is kind of growing up under this ideology of sexuality rather than being informed about the wealth of intimacy and what that actually means. That it's not just, I like you when things are going good for me, or like you said before, this emotional thing, well, if it feels good, then it must be good. And so we'll just stay in this until it doesn't feel good anymore. I can't tell you the amount of times that my marriage did not feel good.
Yeah.
But by the grace of God, and because of our love for one another beyond what we look like and what, we just saw on the surface, but knowing like, okay, this is my brother in Christ. And at the end of the day, I know that his heart is good.
Right.
And I want to pursue him. But it's very interesting that even in that, even when we were kind of trying to be ripped apart, there was this understanding that if we're going to merge back together, it has to be apart from sexuality.
Yeah.
It has to be this, okay, wait a minute, we're going to put sex on the side. And people are like, what, in your marriage? Yes, in our marriage. So that we can really focus on seeing one another. And then the beauty of that is because of that intimacy, then it was able to help us to feel safe, to be able to be a part of sexual intimacy again. But I think that so much of that is really getting tangled up.
Yeah. You know, as you were speaking, which let me say, because Scott and I will be 18 years.
Wow.
I know. You know.
I know. It seems like I was just wearing that brown dress.
I stand by that color. I love that color.
It was a beautiful chocolate color. It was.
Thank you. I know. Isn't it funny when you plan your wedding and you like remember your parents' pictures and you're like, ours are going to be timeless?
Yes.
They're not.
Yeah. All my bridesmaids wore black. It's like we were preparing for a funeral. And I had calla lilies, and my mom was like, those are funeral flowers.
There you go.
And we're like, it's going to be elegant.
What do you know? You know nothing. Yeah. Anyway, I'm right there with you. But yes, I mean, our marriage 100% would not be without, I will say, I'm so grateful. Scott and I have a very good friendship. Absolutely. That has held us together through some really, really hard things. And I'm so grateful for that. But you bring up a point, like I'm even thinking about all the things for those of us that grew up in the church, right? Even when they started finally talking to women about sex, do you remember?
Oh, yes.
It was all, and even like intimacy, it was all within the context of you must like have this intimacy in order to have good sex.
Yeah. Yes.
That's insane. Like that's I just like I'm like, oh, like everything I've been taught, you know, you remember, and I'm not criticizing these books because they have, every young man's book. I mean, I will if you want. I am happy to be that person. But like every young man's battle, every young woman's we can go whatever Steve Arterburn did. And then there were some other ones too, but it was all about basically how to have a friendship in order. I'm on your podcast, so I won't say what I was about to say, but in order to, have sex, I'll just leave it there.
Okay.
We'll be professional. But, so that, I mean, even from those standpoints, it was really just like that. This is just the means to an end. And so how does, what does that teach us is in the, subconscious zeitgeist of like what's relevant, especially in the church, right? Like, well, be a friend so you can end up, getting what you really want.
You're so right. And I mean, that's just my mind too, is thinking about that. But then how do you walk that line of platonic intimacy with someone of the opposite sex? Because as Christians, God's word says that in Christ, we are neither slave nor free, Jew nor Greek, male nor female. And so there should be a certain level of safety, of connection with men and women that's not sexually charged. And I have to say, and sad to admit, that it's only probably in the last 5 years that I've truly been able to recognize there are safe men and there are safe relationships that can be guided into closeness that aren't detrimental.
Yeah.
But even saying that, I say that carefully, but I'd like to know what you think.
I love this question so much. Number one, if you do not have healthy same-sex relationships, then you have no business looking for opposite sex relationships.
That's a good point.
Like you have, and I will stand by it. You can call me and say something to me about it. We can talk through it. I am not wrong. And I say this as a person, and you know me.
Yes.
Who can be friends with dudes.
Yes.
And it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Right?
And never has been
a problem. And part of that has been too, though. I mean, and my husband is not a pusher,
No.
He will handle up. I don't run the show in my household. Right. Thank God. Right. As you know, everybody else I tried to marry would have been a problem, but thankfully. And so, however, that is something I had to learn too. Like, I was more comfortable with guys because they just didn't, I, at the end of the day, would prefer to talk about fantasy football than because I'm talking about hard things all the time. I'm talking about, there is a lightness to being in a relationship with a guy, relationship with a guy. Or for me, like Scott and I, we can talk about UFC to get he is absolutely, if there was no one else on this planet, that is who I would want to hang out with, and I'm so, so grateful for that. And the Lord knew I needed that. And he did too. Right. But I have no business being in close relationship with someone of the opposite sex if I can't have strong relationships with a female.
That makes sense.
You have to work those things out. Guys with guys, girls with girls, for a reason. And not because I don't want everybody to run around being in fear that then all of a sudden you're going to fall in love. But if you're not working them out in an incredibly safe space. Right. Then, because we're crazy to think, and I just believe just tell the truth about things. But I had, even for me, and still do, Scott can look at my phone anytime.
Same.
He, there's no.
Scott can look at it too, but Brian.
Yeah. That'd be hilarious, actually. Especially, they don't know, but your relationship with Scott is pretty great.
Yeah,
too.
I love
and
Scott.
There's all the, because it's accountability and working with men, because I did before and then worked with all women for several years and then back with all men, whatever Scott needs to feel comfortable about that is fine. But I also know their place, right? I don't call a guy when Scott and I aren't good.
Right.
You know, I'm calling my girls,
right,
I'm calling to be like that. I don't call, you have to know your place with all of those. They cannot be your emotional support.
Right.
And that would be weird and inappropriate, and not saying that because, a lot of the guys I work with, when you've got 15 funerals in a year, you walk through hard things, and we're all very aware, but we lean on our spouses for that emotional support, or we lean on other people for that. And everybody's very healthy and intentional with it. But I just stand by that. If you can't have, if your only friends are opposite sex, there's something going on.
Yeah.
And you need to work through it. And I say that as somebody who, I get it.
Yeah. But you get it from a healthy angle.
Yeah. But just because it's easier doesn't make it better.
Yes. And I've said that a million times because it's true. Just because something's easy to do doesn't mean that I should be doing it. I was thinking about that in relation to, so we've talked about men and, but another thing that I see, because I'm primarily still with women, and that really is my heart and my passion. But one thing that I see a lot with women is maybe even a sense of over dependence. Right. And so where does it go from, this is a good platonic relationship to enmeshment where it's not healthy? Because the problem that I'm seeing too with that is that that's where it can easily move into same-sex attraction, right? Because I've become emotionally available to this person. I've become emotionally vulnerable to this person. They are attractive because I have pretty friends. But at the end of the day, I'm not, but I'm not connecting to my spouse. Or I don't have some male figure in my life that I'm attracted to, right? Again, I know I feel like we keep crossing these wires, but they're wires that are crossed. And so then you have these young girls and these older women that find themselves in relationships with friends that no one knows about because they got pulled into that sexual side because there was too much intimacy.
Yeah. I think the first time I ever noticed that was, where I worked before, and it was all females. And what you would see is all of these young women would come in and they have never had a healthy relationship before. And so then they would meet someone and they were kind of forced, if you will, to have a semblance of a healthy relationship, because of, just residential and all of those things. And so all of a sudden, because all they have ever known is sexuality, right? Connection is sex kind of thing. Then they're like, oh, well, I get, I like you and I think you're pretty. And like, if people don't know this, women, like I dress for women.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
like
exactly.
when I worked with all women, this is my, I'm going to can I sidebar for just 1 second?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Whatever I wore when I worked with all women would be commented on every day.
I know the feeling.
Every day, right? Whatever shoes, whatever thing, how my hair is, whatever. Working with dudes, I got this new pair of shoes. I had them for 3 months. And one day, one of the guys at work was like, "Did you get new shoes?"
And that felt like a win.
No, first I was just like, bro, I've worn them like every day because that's what I do. I got, I get something new and just wear the heck out of it.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it took them like 2 weeks to notice I got bangs. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's like, oh, yeah. And it's great, like, because I sure don't do it for any of them and I don't care, but it's hilarious, like, the different. Like, I don't know that they look at my face ever. Like, I don't know that we're just, like, even paying attention, And I love that. But working with women, like, they're going to notice. So when I put an outfit on, I'm like, and I knew exactly who was going to say something to me every day, and like you said, so when you get something new, you're going to walk into your office, and our girl Chantray's gonna be like, "Did you get new shoes?" Like,
right,
whatever.
Exactly.
And like, I do miss that part of it, but not on the days I looked rough, which were many after 2020. But, they're just very different things. I totally lost our point in this, but I did want to explain that. But what going back to it, so then all of a sudden you have girls that are like, but I remember one of the directors was talking to a young woman and she was like, well, do you want to make out with this girl? Like, and she's like, well, no. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I mean, I think she's pretty, but no, but like, like she couldn't understand, like, I don't actually want to have sex with her, but I'm attracted to her and like could not reconcile those things being different because she just never been in healthy relationships.
Right. Yeah.
And so I know that's kind of a microcosm and, a little bit of all things coming together for those moments, like based, in that scenario, but we know when it crosses over.
Yeah, you do.
Like, when you start, like, I am thinking about this person in a different way. Like, we know when it crosses over. And our job is not go, like, necessarily in that relationship, but hopefully you have other relationships too.
Right.
That you can go be in a community and be honest about. And I think the idea of, like, that one best friend is so Hallmark romanticized, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not real. Like, most people don't have like just that. You have seasons of like, this is somebody I talk to a lot,
right?
But most people are not living out every single day with just like one other person, and I don't know that you're supposed to.
Okay.
And I could probably be argued out of that, but I'm just kind of thinking through the last 16 years of this work, and I can't think of anybody that's. Usually you've got like a couple,
right.
You've got a few.
Yeah.
But we know when it crosses over.
Yeah, it's true. We do know. I mean, there's that red flag that comes up.
Yeah.
But in that space of sexuality, because I've been super vulnerable on this podcast because I believe that, that's part of the thing that strengthens us, right? If we're just honest.
Right.
But knowing what the statistics are for, sexual assault or sexual molestation, 1 out of 3 women, 1 out of 6, isn't it?
I think it's 1 out of 4.
1 out of 4 now. See, it's always changing, unfortunately. But when that is a part of your story, then that becomes wired into connection. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that I think that I really wrestled with because being so young and not being aggressively molested, but molested in a space where I wanted to feel connected, where I wanted to feel like I belonged.
Right.
It really created some confusion in that with me. And I remember when I was probably 3rd or 4th grade, I can't remember exactly. I say this all the time, like the Holy Spirit parented me in 2 very specific occasions with my parents. And I say that because they have no recollection of the conversation that they had with me. And it is in my brain.
Right.
But I remember being at that age and I had a friend named Noelle. And she was probably my first very real friend where I felt like we did things together. We were, we had a lot in common. I looked up to her. And I just started having dreams of kissing her. I mean, 3rd grade. And I'm having dreams of kissing this girl and finding her attractive and things like that. And I remember thinking, you shouldn't tell your mom that because she's not going to understand and you shouldn't be having dreams like that. But something in me said, no, I think I need to tell my mom. And I remember telling my mom and being petrified to tell my mom because I just didn't know what her response was going to be. I thought I was going to get in trouble. I was going to get a spanking because I always got spankings. But to my confusion, but also my delight, my mom brought it back to intimacy. And she didn't have that language, but I just remember so clearly her, one, not freaking out that I was telling her that I was having dreams about kissing a girl because that was not common. Like it was a completely different culture. You know, I'm 48 years old. So there's a lot that has changed. But her being able to say like, that makes sense. And just really completely normalizing it and tying it back into your understanding of close connection or close relationship is me and your father or you and your sisters. And you kiss us and you love us and you show affection towards us. And now my mom didn't know about my molestation. So she didn't even know really what she was speaking into. But the Holy Spirit did. And I fully believe that. And her just taking that back to, oh, that's just your brain interpreting connection. I never struggled with it. I really never struggled with it. And there would be other times in my life when I was older, you know, where I might have dreams or I might be particularly attracted to a friend of mine because she was attractive and we spent a lot of time together and, you know, proximity, reciprocity, you know, all of those things. But I would always have that voice in the back of my head, like, no, you just like her a lot. You just really want to spend time with her a lot. And your brain is making that something that it doesn't have to be. How wonderful would it be if we as adults would learn that? One, for ourselves, and then two, be able to communicate that to this younger generation that is coming up so confused.
I mean, it would be incredible if our kids saw us having healthy platonic relationships, like healthy relationships with dads having great relationships with their friends and moms having great relationships with their friends. And it's not just this isolated, you know, thing. And I think what we teach our kids is because all of us want our kids to be social and we want them to have friends, but I don't know that we like teach them what that really means. You know, I don't know that we teach them, because even for them, I know this is something, and my son won't mind me talking about this, but the idea, you know, he is very much, he doesn't want 100 best friends. You know, he wants 1 or 2. That's kind of who he is. And, you know, but all of the like books he read, right? It's like, you know, even Captain Underpants was like 2 best friends, and like you find your person and you know, do all those things. And that's just not always the reality of life. And so it'd be pretty sad when like he'd meet somebody and he'd like him and be like, oh, maybe this is kind of my person, you know? And he, you know, is an incredibly intelligent kiddo and was obviously, it was clear to us, like he was kind of thinking in a much different way than all of the other 5-year-olds, you know, but wasn't socially as developed as the other 5-year-olds because the connection wasn't there. And so, you know, it has been a journey for him to figure out what he wants in relationships and being able to say like, and it's so cool because now he's like, yeah, I really like this guy. He's not like my, you know, he's not my person, but I can enjoy him in this way. Like he's got, you know, I enjoy this person, you know, jujitsu. I've got kind of this little group and I've got this little group, but he's got 1 or 2 that are just, you know, closer. He'll talk about what's going on in his life and, you know, all of that. And he talks to us and, you know, there's supposed to kind of be this, and he took the pressure off of having just like the one best friend and that's what you do everything with and you always get along and you all, you know, because that's just not, it's great for a story. That's just not typically the reality of our world anymore. Like we don't all grow up in the same communities all the time. Like people move, we've moved multiple times, like, and you know, life is much different. But I think now more than ever, because most of our kids are having relationships through their screens, which changes how we view people in general. We won't even get to like pornography and all that junk. Like, it's not even, it's just even how we experience sitting across from someone. Like, if you've only ever FaceTimed or DM'd or texted, that is not the same as sitting with people.
Right.
You know, it's still just kind of snippets of like, I'm enjoying this, and when I'm not, I hang up, or I'm not, I just don't follow you anymore. If I'm not, it's just this very, again, transactional throwaway thing. And people don't know how to sit in conflict. Right. They don't know how to have conversations of like, go and sit across from someone and be like, hey, you told Sally my secret and that like hurt my feelings, and like having to work those things out. And so now I see it in adults who can't do that.
Right.
They're just like, well, that hurt my feelings and I don't have to deal with it anymore, and I'll just not talk to you again. Or I'll just, even in some people that I've respected more than I can say, have thrown away relationships without a conversation. And it's really sad. We think we can do that because it's just a friend.
Yeah. Right. And, it's so, I've had that experience too, where you said something in the moment that you shouldn't have said, or you responded in a way that you shouldn't, and you try to go back and repair it, but they've already determined that one thing that you did defined your character.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't come back from that. And Maddie, my oldest, who's 23, we were talking about that. She's like, well, Mom, it's just part of cancel culture. They just cancel you too.
Yeah.
And, I think as a parent and, as a Christian and as a sister in Christ, like, what is something that we can do? Is there anything practical that you can suggest that we can do? Either questions that we need to ask ourselves, because, we're big on questions on this podcast and reflection, or even just things that we can begin to do differently, application to help us to become more familiar with and invested in platonic intimacy.
Yeah. I like to take everything from a place of, how do I need to show up better?
Great.
Right. And so I guess my question to someone would be, have you even pursued the Lord on your friendships at all?
Good.
Right? Like, have you, because I don't know until recently that I ever really did. Like, I wanted friends, or we'd moved to a new place and we wanted community, but it became more about like Liam, because I think it can then also shift to like, how do I make friends so my kids have friends?
Yeah.
Because we've got to do the stupid PTA stuff and all of that. And I stand by that word. Anyway, but, like it was just, all that, but are we actually pursuing the Lord about our own like healthy, well-rounded relationships first? And I would bet majority of us are like, I haven't prayed about that at all.
I know. And I was just thinking, as you're saying that, like, from the time our children are little, we start talking to them about praying for the one that they are going to marry. Right. And honestly, they may or may not marry. That's not always a given. Some people decide single life is the way that they want to go.
Yeah.
But have we encouraged them to pray about their friends or their circle of friends or their friend group, or how to intentionally show Christ to their friend and reflect Christ to their friend? Yeah. That is great. That's great practical advice.
Yeah, but you're right. We're not like,
I feel like a horrible parent right now.
Like, well, and I'll tell you, if we had not walked through kind of the uncomfortableness of like all of the moves and stuff with Liam, I don't know that we would have either. And it has become, we've prayed more for that, frankly, than his spouse. Probably because at the end of the day, Liam can pick better people than we can. Like, he's just so much better than us. But, I'll pick that back up. Because she does need to fit into our family, and we're probably not the easiest people to fit in with. But I think that, number one, are we even talking to the Lord about any of that? Two, like, who are the people in your life that actually have shown a commitment to you, and maybe that you don't pursue them because they're always pursuing you? Maybe you aren't investing in people. And like, I think that it's worth, especially like, I have a lot of people in my life, but I often have to pause and go, okay, who do I need to make sure that I am reaching? This, like, you and I have been close what feels like my entire life. Right. And I won't respond to your text for like a week sometimes, and
but I know you're alive. I know, sometimes I do send that text like, okay, I just need to know that you're alive and still breathing.
I'm so sorry, because I'll get it in a meeting or I'll get it whatever, and I'm like, I'm sorry, everybody I work with is on drugs, and like I don't, it's a great.
You're literally in a life and death situation. I do understand that,
and it happens, and I'm so grateful because I have had the people who have kind of stuck with me have understood what I do and how I do it, and have been so gracious to me. But also making sure that I'm not taking advantage of that. Mm-hmm. What are the ways that I am not showing up well for people who have shown up well for me? And some of the people that are meant to be in your life are not the ones that make you feel great every time. And I don't mean they make you feel badly. I don't mean that. But they may challenge you in ways, and they may, like, who is actually meant to be in your life and who do you need to show up for in different or better ways? And if you find that you have no one in your life, then my question to you, for you to ask, is why is that? Why have I isolated myself? I think that sometimes too, women will isolate themselves to kind of be all things to their husband and family. And that's not good.
Right.
And it's not right.
Right.
And so, what maybe needs to shift there, and just allow the Lord to take you on that journey. You know, that you can, I was talking to my aunt the other day. I think she's like 87, and my uncle passed away, and she just talked about like the family that has been, like, these women have been with her and walked through her, and they all are like very different. None of them had the same careers. Like, and, we kind of think we're supposed to be in this, but she's like, but they have supported me and cared for me. And she was like, when I leave this world, I will leave having had these incredibly great relationships. And I'm like, man, I love that. I don't want a lot of people at my funeral that sort of knew me and thought I was cool because we hung out a few times.
Right.
I want people to be like, I knew her, and this was what she meant in my life, and what I meant in her life. And, so.
And I think that's just a rich legacy, that goes beyond just family to other families too. If your family are, my mom has close friends, and I just think about that. I think of those women as like aunts. We have no blood relation at all, but I'm invested. If a family member passes away or a baby is born, like, we want to know these things because they're connected to my mom, they're connected to us. And so I think that those are beautiful, practical things that we can put into place so that we can start to really invest in the platonic relationships around us. And so thank you so much for just spending your time with me, because I know that it is valuable.
Wow.
And just sharing with us something that we don't think about, that we need to think about. And I think that it's not just good for us who are listening now, but I think that if we begin to understand this and live this out, then it becomes a legacy for the next generation. And maybe we can pull back some of this destructive intimacy and, false intimacy, right? And part of our sexualized mentality back into what is rooted and what is healthy and what is life-giving.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I mean, I'm just so impressed and proud of what you're doing. So I know I text you all the time, like, this is so good. I'm really grateful. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you so much for that encouragement. And we are definitely going to talk to you again, because there's just so many things. And we just did the Sifted Week conference, and so we're recording a little in advance. So you guys will be getting this week's after. But man, I want to sit with you again with the things that you said in that conference. And I know that the listeners who were there are going to be like, yes.
Oh man, I know. I feel like I have to sit back. Yeah, that conference, it was incredible. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. But I'm excited to talk more. And by excited, I mean a little like, because the words that God gives you, that it's like you're going to say this to people, but it's really about you. So
every time.
I know.
Every time. I always say, Lord, don't let me teach anything that I haven't first learned. I say that, and then I'm like, oh Lord, now I got to learn it.
I know. I think that's how he keeps me humble every time. He's like, he's like, you speak fine, but just to remember, you got a lot to do. So I'm like, true. And that's fine. That's fine. I don't want to be arrogant with it. So we'll stay.
Right. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk again.
Okay.
I
know that y'all are still processing this conversation. To be honest, so am I. And I want to encourage you to keep doing that and get the word out about platonic intimacy. Get it in more ears. Share on social media with friends, and feel free to direct any questions to our email at siftedwheatpodcast@gmail.com. I appreciate your support so much. Next, we're going to be talking about healthy sexuality and how we can move out of what we've accepted as normal and start shifting our mindset to bring healthier intimacy in and out of the bedroom. Until next time, keep healing.